There we go. It is episode 52 of Stick to Hockey Live. Jason Myrtetus and from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. It's Bill Meltzer. Billy, how are you?
I am doing well. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's been a bit of a whirlwind the last, that road trip, 4-game road trip. They come out of it basically with a record of 1-3. They get the one win in Calgary, Bill. They get kind of punched a little bit in the first two, 6-2, 6-2 against Seattle and Vancouver, although those games look different. And then the healthy scratch of Travis Sanheim, and they lose that game. Looked like they ran out of gas against Edmonton and just can't take penalties against that team. Let's start with the Sanheim scratch, because that's kind of been met with, different opinions on social media about should he have been scratched. It was his hometown. That seems, almost, some people say, that's unfair because he had family there. But I say, hey, if a player needs to be scratched, geography, all that other stuff doesn't matter. The coach has to make the decision based on hockey and hockey alone. What did you think of the Sanheim scratch?
Well, it was the second player that's happened with the season. Towards it with Morgan Frost, the one game he sat this year was in Toronto, which is where his dad was the PA announcer for the Maple Leafs. He largely grew up in that building. His mom and dad were there that night, and they sat in that game. So, you have to be consistent, right? If you're going to scratch a player, you're going to scratch the player. It was a tactic that Mike Keenan used to use on occasion. Players, not something players generally like, of course. Players never want to sit, but being sat with your parents in the building and in the building where you played your junior hockey, well, it stings. No question, it stings. So, but Sanheim's a professional, and it didn't just happen out of the blue, and it's been based on performance. And it was, a bit of a statement from the coach. So, whether the player likes it or doesn't like it, he doesn't set the lineup. Kevin Hayes has been scratched this season. Travis Konechny was benched in a period this season, leading the team in scoring. So, it's part of playing for John Tortorella. Whether you like or you don't, you're responsible for your own play ultimately. So, it's up to Sanheim to respond on an ongoing basis. And I didn't think he was going to come out of it in one game either. So, he didn't get into it in one game. He's not going to get out of it in one game. So we'll see how it goes over the rest of the season.
Some will speak to malice being an intent here, Bill, because, you mentioned Morgan Frost going to his hometown in the building he largely grew up in, watching Leaf games with his dad there. And then, Sanheim in Calgary, where he had family, and they don't visit Calgary very often, once a year. And then Kevin Hayes was actually suspended against his former team, the New York Rangers. But I suspect, you can go, okay, there's malice involved here, or maybe more intent to make a bigger impression on the player. But in all three situations, those players kind of earned their way to where they were going. And it just happened to be with those kind of parallel storylines coinciding with the healthy scratching.
Yeah, I don't think from the coach's point of view it's anything personal. And one thing with John Tortorella too is, although you can get in his doghouse, you can get out of it too.
Yeah.
So
he always drops a ladder. He does.
Yeah, he does. And when the player performs, he's quick. He'll praise the player for performing. So there's I don't know. I do think. Well, I don't know. I don't think there's malice. I do think there is. Being fully aware of what the situation is too.
Greater impact.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're not, like if the Frost example, they could have sat him in Ottawa the next night, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever. With the Sanheim. Sanheim's family's on this trip. He's from Manitoba, but he plays junior hockey for Calgary, as did his twin brother. His twin brother was also in the building that night too. And certainly for Hayes, anytime he plays the team he started out with, it's been still the majority of his career, although it's been Philly a little while now. But it definitely leaves an impression on the player. But it wasn't just because of one play or one game or whatever. There's usually a number of games that builds up to it. So, I think that it's not fatal to a relationship. I believe Torch, when he was talking about his relationship with Cam Atkinson, said he scratched him a couple of times the first year together. So,
Yep.
And then I mean, there's not a bigger advocate for Torch out there than Cam is. So
Yeah.
I think it's the relationship evolves over time, and that's one of those points. Torch has said many times that he doesn't mind confrontation. He thinks it can be constructive in the long term, and and ultimately comes down to this: he's the boss. He makes the lineups, so it's up to the player to respond.
Yeah, and don't put yourself in that decision zone to begin with. Travis Sanheim, Bill, it's obviously of paramount importance for this healthy scratching to have the right impact on the player moving forward. There's still a decent amount of runway left in the remainder of this season, but this is a player they just committed to at the beginning of this year to a very long extension, the max extension. And, you can go, well, Sanheim or Provorov's not going to be here. I'm going to talk about Provorov in a minute, but when you look at the impact that Sanheim has and the way he needs to finish this season, he needs to finish this season strong.
No question. Also in the fact that, hey, he has a no trade that kicks in on July 1st. Up until then, so the Flyers, as they make their evaluation, and they're going to make a decision. Okay, do we stick with this for 8 years, or do we kind of cut bait, right?
Yeah.
Because that they can do, where you could send him to 31 other teams, and come July 1st, all of a sudden all the balance of power, the tradability shifts to. If he was having a better year, wouldn't even be a discussion. You committed to him for a reason, but I think that down the stretch, it's important. You want him to close strong. I mean, listen, back in November, when not very much was going right for the team, actually Sanheim was playing for several weeks, very much like he did a year ago when he won the Barry Ashby Trophy, jumping into plays, a lot of confidence, and so. There have been stretches even this season where he's played pretty well for a stretch of time. Other times he's played fine in his own end, but he's never going to be a shutdown guy. So you really need the offensive end from him too, and just making plays, showing some confidence. The last game against Edmonton, he had 1 assist. It wasn't like he tore it up on the scoreboard, but he was a force in jumping into place from all 3 periods, and him standing out in that way. And it was kind of disappointing, truthfully, that he went backwards, basically starting the next game against Nashville. And it wasn't just not being assertive; it was also mistakes in his own end of the ice too. And I think Tortorella can live with errors of aggression as long as they're not the same mistake repeated over and over and over again. But when a player kind of retreats into a shell and he knows they're capable of better, that's when they kind of get on his bad side. So the Flyers absolutely need Sanheim to play, if not to his peak form, at least close to it, at least work back towards it. And for another reason, for his own confidence and peace of mind exiting a season. A lot of times when a player signs a big extension, that first year can be pretty tough.
Yeah,
because he feels that pressure to live up to the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And and when it doesn't happen the way you want it to, it can spiral downhill sometimes.
Yeah, it absolutely is the case, especially when you sign it basically on the eve of the season. It's got a particular impact mentally on a player. And some people go, well, the impact is you got all that money guaranteed, so you don't try as hard. I don't know if that's it. I think it's more the pressure of the money. If we know hockey players, we know it's not a question of try. Sometimes it's a question of just getting it done. Provorov, the guy that I mentioned before, Bill, he played over 27 minutes against Calgary. And then he comes back the next night, plays over 25 minutes. And the only time that he's really gotten a lot of air in conversation from Flyer media, Flyer fans, or a whole heck of a lot was on the Pride night when he declined to wear the jersey in warmups. He hasn't gotten a lot of air for his play and what he's done on the ice. We know this is a guy, Bill, that's always available. I mean, and is as well conditioned an athlete as you will find in the National Hockey League. And he's playing some pretty darn good hockey. He's not putting up eye-popping offensive numbers. I think we have to all realize that the appointment of him as a Norris guy very early in his career, that he was trending in that direction, maybe is not where he's going, because that is such an offensive-minded award. But he's a guy, I keep equating him to a really good offensive lineman in football. When you don't hear his name, he's probably done his job pretty damn well. And he's playing really good hockey. And that availability, coupled with the fact that he can eat 27 minutes, 22, 5-on-5, and 5+ on the PK, is something that's worth more than I think people are giving him credit for.
No question. No question. I think that actually in the time since that controversy, he has played his best hockey, I would say, since 2020.
Niskanen. Yep. Since Niskanen.
Since Niskanen, yeah. I mean, he's been, especially on the defensive side of the puck, he has been breaking up so many plays. You know, and just in the right spot. I mean, sometimes, many times, scoring chances don't even develop because he kills it right away. You know, he's been there was a play. Actually, on the one penalty, one of the two penalties the Flyers killed successfully against Edmonton. He didn't want to just throw the puck blindly looking for a clear. He was actually able to skate it out of trouble.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just a heads up, poised kind of a play. Those kind of things, the goals you save are worth, you know, particularly the role that he plays. I mean, you know, he's been really, really, really good. Not just getting minutes, but deserving those minutes too.
Yeah.
Which
he handled McDavid on a rush attempt. McDavid coming down the right side, and he had him, and he gave McDavid nothing. McDavid went to the bench very frustrated. We don't see that. I mean, he got wound up. He was flying. And Provorov just stayed with him, got his hand on his hip to feel where he was going, and never let him up for air on that rush attempt. And that is not something that McDavid is used to, and not many people can do. And I thought it was an excellent play, the way he gapped it and stayed with him.
No doubt. Also there were plays. Now the Vancouver game kind of got away from the Flyers, but there were stretches of that game where, you know, Pettersson was dancing around and Provorov was right with him. Great being plays up with his stick. Very heavy stick and very quick stick, and almost always in the right position. I mean, he's put together a very good stretch of hockey for really a solid month now.
Yeah, and to me, he's one of those guys. Be careful, you know, wishing he gets traded, because he creates an enormous hole with his absence if he were to get moved from the availability, the minutes, and everything else. To me.
Oh, sure. And okay, if you trade the player, all right, how do you replace those minutes, and at what cost?
Yeah.
Right?
Are you better with the replacement?
Are you a better team for doing it? Right. So it's not an easy decision to make. If you're making it, it has to be the right trade. It's not. This is not a case of addition by subtraction. No. I mean, from a hockey perspective, it's hard to do.
But one of the things I really outlined in today's Flyers Daily was Joel Farabee. Now, Farabee, I think I'm supposed to talk to Torts today for tomorrow's Flyers Daily and Hockey and Hounds, but I think he may have dodged a bullet being the next player to be healthy scratched, playing .352 in the Calgary game, down a forward for the end of the second period and all of the third. And I think the reason he dodges the bullet is because Konechny isn't able to go against Edmonton. Farabee's been more down than up this season, based on what we know. He scored 20 goals in 55 games in the 2020-21 season, and he's a player that, you know, got the contract. We lauded the contract because it could be tremendous value, but this year he hasn't lived up to it. Now, he had his surgery, I think, on June 24th, when it came as a bit of a surprise. He hurt himself in training for the season. But I think we have to also realize that this player was not able to train for the year, was not supposed to come back until Thanksgiving, around Thanksgiving, started out the season on the team, never able to look like he's been playing catch up with his game, with his conditioning, with every element of it this year. And I think we have to be understanding of that fact that, you know, an injury and not being able to prepare for a year really does not put the player in an ideal position for success. And I compared his numbers to Eichel right after he had it. Numbers, and Eichel's numbers still aren't where they were prior as a point per game player. And then I looked at Claude Giroux going into his 29-year-old season when he had 58 points, and everybody was saying, he's in his upper 20s, he's trending down, he won't age well in this league. And then when he had an offseason to train again, he came back with a 102 and is still putting up good numbers at 34, 35 years of age. So, I know people like to make the grandiose statements because of the moment of a player's in at that particular time, but this is still a really young player, and this is going to end up being a frustrating season for him, but he's got to use what happens this season to train harder for next year and hopefully not have to deal with any, recurrence of injury and rehab from any kind of off-season procedure that he might get done.
Yeah, and remember last year was a pretty injury-plagued year for him too.
Mm-hmm.
A couple shoulder things, and it just, he wasn't quite right in the second half of that season. Very, very delicate kind of surgery he had. I mean, I know a couple players have had it, but it's something that just from a strength perspective and a confidence perspective too. I mean, it can take a calendar year. It really can. So you do have to put it in a certain perspective, and it's funny too. I guess because of what expectations were going in. But you can look at, you can look at Owen Tippett, we all agree is taking another step forward this year. Agreed. He and Farabee don't really have a big difference in their point production this year. It's actually pretty close.
Yeah.
Now Farabee's not scoring. He hasn't been a consistent threat by any means, and he's one of the guys that we're counting on for certainly more than he's produced. But it's funny how similar numbers can look pretty different. Even though Farabee's actually the youngest forward that they have.
Mm-hmm.
He still is. He's a year younger than Tippett, a year younger than Frost. So and a year younger than Cates. So, so he's still just 22 years old this season. So there's plenty of time for him to bounce back. But yes, it's crucial that he have a good off season. It's crucial that he rebuild some strength and there have been pockets of the season where I don't think he's ever really, even though there have been stretches of the year where he's scored and put together a couple little streaks, including at the beginning of January. I thought he was starting to look close to back to where he was, and then he's kind of had backslid since then. But I think there have been pockets of the season, parts of games where he looks like the player we grew familiar seeing. The guy who was always around the puck, with just very good instincts and creating some chances and getting scoring chances, willing to shoot the puck, piling up a decent number of shots. I thought that actually, considering how little he played in Calgary and the need for him to play more minutes, because he's one guy who had fresher legs. I mean, that was a very grueling game in Calgary. As you said, that there was Konechny's injury, but even after Konechny's injury, they were playing with 9 forwards.
Yeah, because Lexell barely played.
Yeah, so 2 forwards barely played, and one gets injured. I mean, there was a need for him to play more minutes, and I thought he had a better game. Yeah. So I mean, that's a step, right? You have to keep taking those steps, but that's been when we were doing Flyers Daily over the weekend, talking about the biggest disappointments this season. I think that it was Konechny and Sanheim with the 2 names that we put out there, and I mean,
Farabee,
I'm sorry. The only thing disappointing with with Konechny is that he's injured.
Yeah,
and they had because at some point there was going to be a little bit of a slump, but no. But Farabee and Sanheim are the 2 names we put out as the disappointments this season. So with a quarter of the season to go, it would be nice to see him finish strong, even if he doesn't put up great numbers over that stretch, just looking more like himself.
Bill, we're now 8 days away from the deadline. It's going to be March 3rd, a week from tomorrow. And we are seeing some movement around the NHL. It's pretty significant movement. Guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Vladimir Tarasenko. We're seeing some big names We haven't heard much out of Flyerland just yet. And I saw in Freege's 32 Thoughts, the written column this week, that he mentioned the Flyers are looking for centers. And Free just said this verbally a bunch of times on 32 Thoughts, the podcast, and has written it, that they're looking for centers. Are they looking to make a center deal in season? Is there a reason why Frege keeps repeating they're looking for centers? To me, it's concerning because to me, I'm looking at that going, if you're looking for centers, is the news on Couturier not nearly as optimistic as it once was? Yeah. Is there new information that we don't know yet, that they know yet? And that's the reason why they're looking for centers. And because I find it odd that they're looking for centers in season in a year of where they should be selling.
Yeah. And if you're looking for, although we moved back to center last game, but they have Hayes in a wing. If you're that desperate for centers, you can always play Hayes in the middle. He's spent most of his career there. Long term. And this goes back a number of years. I mean, I know Dylan Larkin is a player they've always loved.
Yeah.
Checks quite a few boxes, but then you get into the whole cost benefit analysis too. I don't see them being. I mean, you can be both a buyer and a seller. I think the best example of that was that disastrous 06-07 season. But before the end of that season, Cobra is bringing in a young player, but they also brought in Marty Biron.
Yeah, which led to Danny Briere.
which led directly to Danny Briere, and also a pretty good run for Marty as the starter for a couple of years too. So so they were both buying and selling at the same time. I think it's possible to do both, but I don't know. I mean, the problem right now is when you're trying. You see what it costs Ottawa to unload Zadorov. When you're trying to create cap space, I mean, teams, it's kind of funny that just because of the circumstances of the times, cap space and draft picks are worth more than NHL players in some cases.
Yeah, because draft picks are cheap and they're currency, and cap space is what it's all about, no doubt. I mean, every time I read that or hear Frege say that they're looking for centers, it sends a shiver up my spine. That number 14, I don't know. We'll probably hear from Chuck in the next week. Probably, certainly right around the deadline, but we'll see where that goes. But that keeps sending a shiver up my spine.
And along those lines, and we don't know. You and I are both in the loop on quite a few things. I personally have not heard any updates on Sean.
Me neither.
Gone quiet.
Yeah,
it's gone quiet.
I know people like to read into what we say or what we think sometimes, but as being people insist that you and I put out these things called test balloons, messaging for the organization. I will tell you that I have never, on my kids' eyes, been asked to put out some kind of test balloon information or given information with that intent. Never.
No, we're reading tea leaves, basically what everybody's doing. And we're reading these tea leaves based upon this, that we were talking, for the beginning of this process with Couturier about maybe a March return. Well, he hasn't even done non-contact practice at this point, and practice time is scarce. And while he's skated on his own, it hasn't reached an intensity level or frequency yet where you can tell a player's close to returning.
Yeah. And as James points out here on our stream that he skated today, but again, he's been skating, and that's the thing. And you just keep hearing that they're looking for centers, and I go, okay, are they looking for centers because they'd rather put Cates on the wing? Are they looking for centers because they're seeing Cutter Gauthier long term and saying, he'd be a better power forward as a winger, or is it, hey, they're looking for centers because they're always looking for centers? Centers just have tremendous value. I don't know, but it kind of freaks me out. Bill, I know you're dealing with a sick kid. I can hear her coughing a little bit in the background, so we hope she feels better. We'll let you get back to her. Thanks for doing this today, as always. We appreciate it. Great stuff, and we'll talk soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Jason.
There he is, Bill Meltzer. Called into duty today. His daughter's dealing with a little bit of a cough, and it's still that time of year in a lot of cases. But we thank Bill for joining us as always, and we need centers, man. It's freaking me out. Let's get to a little something we do on the show every week. We make you money. Well, we don't make you money. Tone makes you money. Time for another edition of Tone's Takes. Time for another edition of Tone's Takes. Tone, we're getting closer and closer to two things. A, the deadline, and then B, the final kind of remainder of the regular season and the push to the playoffs. You know, when you look at futures at this time of year, I imagine it's a little wonky in the sense that you don't know what teams are going to add and you don't know what teams are going to need to get into the playoffs down the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like in the East. This time last year, the East, the playoff teams were decided. It was just positioning that was up for grabs. Now there's 4 or 5 teams on the bubble. Like you don't know. I mean, the only thing that's probably decided is Toronto's we're going to face Tampa Bay in the first round again. Home ice has to be decided there. I mean, everything else, even Jersey is kind of on Carolina's heels. I mean, Boston's going to win the East, but the bubble teams like Pittsburgh, Washington, are they going to make it? Buffalo, Florida, are they gonna rise up? Like it's great. It's so much different than last year. So yeah, definitely exciting.
Last year the top 8 in the East was determined, with so much remaining on the schedule, and then the East versus the West this year. The East has dominated the West for the most part. I think only 2 teams in the Eastern Conference have a losing record against the West. I can't even figure out why that is. I mean, I look at California and I go, okay, I get that part of the equation, but geez, it's pretty nuts. Let's get to your plays for this week on Tone's Takes. Dimers is where your plays are on at Tone's Takes on Twitter as well. Ovechkin is back. We talked about Ovi being out last week and the effect it could have on Kuznetsov, but he returns and you like him over 1.5 points here, getting plus money.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of emotion here in this game for Ovechkin first time playing since his father unfortunately passed. Everything else on him is juiced. 4.5 shots on goal is minus 140. No, thank you. Score goal is minus 125. No, thank you. So I'm going to get him to go over 1.5 at plus 146. Still would like a little bit better number over 1.5, but for Ovechkin in this situation, I'm definitely on it. The Ducks give up the most goals per game on the road at 4.2. Caps have only scored 6 goals since the break in 9 games. I think this is a breakout game. He's going to give this team such a lift, and he's going to be involved tonight, shooting the puck, dishing out. So I like the value of this play over 1.5 at plus 146.
Yeah, the other part of it, he's a rise to the occasion type player. They're playing at home against the worst team in the league in the Ducks. He's gonna eat tonight for sure. One of those other teams that gives up a lot of goals is the Vancouver Canucks. Second most goals they give up in the NHL. They got St. Louis tonight in St. Louis, and obviously the Blues have made some moves here, toned down the stretch to sell. But a lot of times, a lot of pressure comes off a team when you do that, and you play loose and you can punch some good numbers in. And the Blues right now, you like them tonight in this game, and you like the over in the game.
Yeah, I like the over 7 plus 123. Don't want to lay the juice on the 6.5, so I'm going to go over 7 at plus money. Vancouver has 11 straight overs on the road. They're 22-5 to the over this season on the road. 12 of those games have gone over 7 goals. So it's a good spot here for this game to get a little alternate line at plus money. The Blues have been a good fade all year as far as the over goes. They're 16-9 to the over at home. Binnington just has been terrible for them. And like you said, they should be able to start playing a little bit more loosey-goosey now that they made these deals. Another play on this game, if you're interested, Vancouver first period overs on the road. They're 26-3 to the 1.5 on the road this season. So I took them the other night against Nashville in the first period. Didn't get there. The game over still got there, but with the stat like that, it could be a good play in this game if you either want to lay the juice on the 1.5 or go with an alternate at 2 at plus money.
Wow. Yeah, and if you push, it's better than a loss. And to get the plus money. Bruins tonight are in Seattle. It seems like every team on the Eastern Seaboard is visiting Seattle over the last week to 10 days. Tonight it's the Bruins in Seattle. You got a 3-way here?
Yeah, I like Boston in regulation minus 108. I mean, there's not many teams that have beaten Boston this year. Seattle was one of them in Boston, and they shut them out 3-0. So I think the Bruins are going to be up for this game. I mentioned last week I'm not high on the Seattle team. They got burned last week. The Flyers, it was a tough game for them in that loss, but I think Boston's going to come in here and take care of business tonight.
No question about it. So here's the 3 plays. Tones takes for this week. Ovechkin over 1.5 at plus 146. St. Louis, that game with Vancouver, over 7 at plus money, plus 123. And then that Boston 3-way at minus 108. People can get your stuff at Dimers, and where else, Tone?
Dimers, and then on Twitter at Tones Takes, I'll have more plays today. It's a nice looking card tonight. So
it's a beefy card tonight, too. A lot of games on the card tonight. I like it when there's a lot of action happening around the National Hockey League. Tone, great stuff as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
There he is. Tones takes another edition here on Stick to Hockey Live. Everybody, enjoy the hockey tomorrow. Flyers are going to be taking on La Habitante, the Montreal Canadiens, Friday night. So enjoy that and have a great rest of your day. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you tomorrow in a brand new edition of Stick to Hockey Live. Thanks, everybody.